Dr. Paul Craig Roberts joining us by phone here in a moment. And we're going to get to George, Perry, Robert, and Jasper, at least while Roberts is on with us. But I want to get Robert's take on his new article, published at Infowars.com and many other places, about Obama takes the U.S. to new levels of hypocrisy. We'll also get his expertise on the housing numbers that are coming out and the fact that the Fed's monetizing more and more of the debt, and how he sees the Japan crisis tying into all that. Former head of policy, Department of Treasury, father of Reaganomics, no stranger to this show. But Jesse, I threw the question out with the head of NATO admitting that, yes, al-Qaeda was the first group, the core group, attacking Muammar Gaddafi. Anwar al-Awlaki hanging out secretly at the Pentagon, but back in the news today, menacing us. The underwear bomber he controlled, the U.S. agents helping get the underwear bomber on the plane. I mean, is the military aware of the fact that, sure, there's some useful idiot ground Islamicists that really believe they're jihading, but the leadership of these guys is basically tied into this corporate crime syndicate and is being used to attack the Serbs, attack Gaddafi, to menace the U.S. into giving up our liberties. I mean, what's your view on that as a veteran?
Well, I know for a fact, you know, when you're in a leadership position and you're told to do stuff, you know, you got blinders on and it's all you can do to just do what you're told and get through whatever it is we have to get through. But I mean, we were very frustrated on the ground, especially in Afghanistan, because no matter where we would go, it was like al-Qaeda was like a phantom. It was like this mystery boogeyman that, like, we would go to villages and we would be told in our intelligence reports, oh, you're the first Americans to ever go in this area. And we'd get there and we'd see, like, MRE trash on the ground, and people would be like, you know, our interpreters would talk to the locals, and they'd be like, oh, yeah, there's some white guys here, like, 2 hours ago. And, like... Yeah,
it's a wild goose chase, and the Times of London reports... Thousands of Taliban and al-Qaeda leaders that were caught in 2001, 2002 were ordered to be released and then paid. Did you guys know about that?
Yeah, well, we don't receive any information. We're so busy and over there doing what we're doing. I mean, there were some times when we'd get to see the news, and we'd see Geraldo or somebody on there talking about something that never even happened, like on missions that we were on, and just completely fabricating being attacked and getting contact with the enemy and everything. And we were just told, you know, oh, well, don't worry about that. That's just, you know, that's just news speak and blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, it was just like, no matter what misinformation was being put out there, it was just, you know, oh, just do your job and be a good soldier, and, you know, we'll take care of the American people. Well,
that's it. You know? Al-Qaeda is a phantom chess piece that they put on the map wherever they want to invade, or they have al-Qaeda attack the Serbs, attack Gaddafi, and then humanitarian bombing. And they're now admitting, yeah, we're going to land troops, but it's going to be humanitarian backup to the rebels. And then they admit in fine print they were there months ago setting the whole thing up. It's incredible. God bless you, sir. I appreciate your call. I wanted to basically ask that question of the Afghanistan-Iraq veteran as I then pose it to you, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, because now I'm finally going on big national conservative shows, and mainline big hosts are saying, you're right, Alex. I guess it is true. Al-Qaeda is a creation of the Pentagon, and you're right, it's all staged. So I really think they've gone too far. Dr. Roberts, what's your take on this?
Well, Alex, I can't claim to know. My own opinion is that the war on terror is a hoax, and it's a cover for undeclared agendas. And I don't know what all those agendas are. I have some idea about what some of them might be. And I also suspect that al-Qaeda is a hoax, that there's really no such thing other than something that the CIA has created as part of this undeclared agenda. But I don't know. I don't have any inside information, and anyone who does doesn't tell me. But I've been suspicious of this war on terror since the beginning, because I remember a neighbor calling me when the World Trade Center towers were being attacked, and said, turn on TV, and I turned it on, and as you may remember, they showed over and over the buildings coming down. And I could see the buildings weren't falling down. They were blowing up. It was obvious they were blowing up. And so I've always wondered of that. And the other thing that made me think it was a hoax was that if the official story is correct, and a few Saudi Arabians pulled this off, it's the most massive government failure in world history. There's never been such a coordinated, total failure of every aspect of the government. All the intelligence agencies, NORAD, air traffic control, airport security, the Pentagon, everything failed.
But such a perfect execution by guys directed from caves. Doctor, can you...
Wait. Let me get to the real point. The real point is that if this was actually true and happened, the President, the National Security Council, the CIA, the Congress would all be demanding to know how in the world could this have happened? How could so many people fail? They would have insisted immediately on an investigation just to find out how our systems could so totally fail, and heads would have rolled. Somebody would have been held accountable. And yet they resisted all investigations, and no heads ever rolled for what the government says is the most massive failure of government in human history. So these things make me suspicious. And then what also makes me suspicious is all this hypocrisy we see. All of a sudden now we're concerned about humanitarian death in Libya. Well, why aren't we concerned about all the ones we inflict? I mean, we wrecked Iraq for, 7 or 8 years that we've been wrecking Afghanistan. What is it now? For almost 10 years. We never say a word when the Israelis wreck Lebanon and wreck Gaza. We don't say a word about all the deaths in Bahrain or Yemen. We routinely kill people in Pakistan with drones. We force the Pakistani army to attack its own people, its own tribes. And all of a sudden now we have humanitarian concerns in Libya. So it doesn't really make any sense, you know what I mean? And you can just see it doesn't make any sense. And so you figure that there's some agenda going on and they're not telling us what it is.
Yes, sir. Do me a favor. You're coming through pretty good, but perhaps if you're using a headset or a regular phone, just speak directly into it, Dr. Paul Craig-Roberts, because we really want to hear what you have to say. But, I mean, here's a piece of evidence. Al-Qaeda leader dined at the Pentagon just months after 9/11 while he was a wanted man on the news. And Anwar al-Awlaki is involved in all these domestic attacks. He's on the news menacing us. We're now told he's the head guy under bin Laden. Shouldn't there be an investigation on why he was hanging out at the Pentagon, having dinner with the Secretary of the Army and the top brass, if he's such a deadly al-Qaeda commander?
Well, you would think so, yes. You know, another giveaway, Alex, I think we've talked about this before, is all of the terror cases. All of the terror cases, domestic terror cases, they're all orchestrated by the FBI. So why does the FBI have to go to such extreme lengths to ensnare people who are not inclined to be terrorists into some fabricated terrorist act so that they can actually have a real case? I mean, if we're overrun by terrorists, you'd think they would be everywhere, and the government wouldn't have to be spending all this time and money trying to create terrorists out of people who aren't. And every one of these cases that have gone to court have been terrorism plots organized by the FBI. So, again, this tells you that there's really no al-Qaeda. That the FBI has to go out and mimic it. So we know the results of war and police states. So we have to figure that's two of the agendas.
Yes, sir. Shifting gears into your latest article dealing with Obama taking America to new heights of hypocrisy, you've already hit on some of that, but in my 16 and a half, 17 years studying this 24/7 and looking at it, I've never seen, as soon as you think Clinton's Orwellian and then Bush is Orwellian and now Obama, they say don't call it a war, it's a kinetic military action. Don't call dropping DU bombs military. Now we learn they did arm the rebels beforehand. Al-Qaeda's involved. Now they've got the Marines saying, yeah, we're going to land, and the British Marines, but it's going to be backing up the rebels, so it's not a military action, and there's not going to be a ground war, but we are going to be on the ground. I mean, it's beyond 1984. Why are they so arrogant now?
Because they've gotten away with it. No one's been held accountable. And, you know, the Bush regime, well, Clinton got away with it in Serbia, right? Bombing people. And then the Bush regime got away with flagrant violations of statutory U.S. law. I mean, it wasn't something simple like sex with an intern. I mean, he created massive numbers of felonies under the law, and so Bush should have been arrested and prosecuted and imprisoned. And any number of the members of the administration, they're all criminals under American law. And yet nothing, there wasn't even any protest about it. You know, the violation of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act is a felony for every offense. It's a felony. So how many millions of wiretaps did they make? Torture is a felony under United States law. And yet Bush can write in his autobiography or his memoirs or whatever that he ordered it. And that he would, was proud to do it. And so if there's no accountability, they can just do whatever. And they now use words in ways that are just obviously such distortion. If we now have them, we're going to have troops on the ground, but it's not troops on the ground. So
it's incredible. I mean, you study history as you've done. This megalomania always sets in, and I think that will be their undoing, is that they've gone so power mad, and pride goes before a fall, hubris goes before a fall. The problem is this 1,000-foot edifice is going to fall on us when it falls. How do you see this ending? And then let's go through some of the hypocrisy and what you think their end game is.
I don't know what their end game is, and I don't understand why they're taking these massive risks with the economy, with the dollar. The whole thing could explode at any time, and unless they have some kind of, I don't think they've got the whole world under their thumb. So I don't know why they don't see the risk. We have these massive budget deficits that are getting worse because there's no recovery, and there's no way to finance them except by printing money. Well, how long can you print a new $1.5 trillion every year before the dollar disappears as a currency? You can't do that very long. It's just, and if they say, oh, we're going to stop printing the money and we're going to take all the money back out, which is what Bernanke said, well, they can't do that without sending the interest rates, off into the universe somewhere. I mean, the whole economy would just collapse.
Well, Doctor,
I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what they're doing, what they're not thinking, unless it's some kind of agenda we don't know about that makes sense of all this, but I can't figure out what it would be.
Well, Doctor, I mean, you were the guy who ran the Treasury Department, the head of policy. You're listed by many major publications as one of the top 10 living economists. Stuff you predicted 5-6 years ago on this show is now happening. The monetization of debt is accelerating. All of this is happening. Inflation is rearing its head in some areas, but the overall depression is putting the brakes on that. And now the meltdown of Europe into Portugal, Spain is beginning. I mean, where does this end?
Well, in catastrophe. You see, but look, Alex, there's already been massive inflation. Food prices haven't reflected it yet, but the cereal grains have gone up tremendously, at 30, 40, 50, 100%, some of them. When that works its way through the food processing companies, everybody's going to see big jumps in prices. And when that hits, the first time they can no longer hide the inflation in the way they rig the consumer price index. The first time there's really a sign of inflation, what do you think is going to happen to interest rates? Because all the bonds are so highly priced now, the interest rates are practically zero. And a lot of people remaining wealth as in bonds because they know the stock market is being driven by money creation. Well, once those interest rates move up, the bond prices are going to collapse, and whatever's left of private wealth will be ruined. So I don't know. I don't think there's any fault, and we could say, well, the agenda is to destroy everything, but why would people with power want to destroy the basis of their power? So I can't believe that's it either, and it may just be what you said. It's hubris. It's belief that they're omnipotent and so powerful that nothing they do can come back to bite them. Maybe that's the craziness. Or it's just the short-term, greed-driven, profit-driven oligarchies. You know, there are very few ruling economic elites. It's Wall Street, the military security complex, the oil industry. They may all be focused on such short-run profits. We're going to steal everything we can, and we're going to be rich. And maybe they think they can do that and get out of the dollar before it goes. But if you look at all those profits all those people have, they try to get out of the dollar. That's like China and Japan and OPEC trying to get out of the dollar at the same time. So it just can't happen. I just don't know, Alex. I have no idea other than how do you avoid the catastrophe?
Well, they knew this Ponzi scheme would lead to this, and so they're racing to get as much as they can before it collapses. And George Soros, as I'm sure you know, in 4 days is going to be, or 5 days, is going to be meeting back at Bretton Woods, openly calling for a new international order. He's got all these bigwigs coming in. So I think they plan to pose as the saviors and bring in a new level of bubble. But many economists I've talked to just say that things are still so based in U.S. bonds that you can't transition quickly to something new because it will radically deteriorate quickly as well.
Yes, I don't think they can transition. And the reason I don't think they can, I don't think China will cooperate. I don't think Brazil will cooperate. I don't think Russia will cooperate. I just don't see how they can transition, and I don't think you can create a new world order by causing everybody to lose confidence in you. If we wanted to do something like that, we should have behaved quite differently and made everybody feel secure and confident, and that our leadership made sense and was sound, and that people could understand what we were doing. But instead, we've had all these senseless wars, the massive costs, resulting in massive deficits that can't be financed except by printing money. The whole world knows this. So I just, we have the puppet states of Europe. We can get them to do what we want. We have the puppet state of Canada and Australia. We've been trying to create a few puppet states out of former constituent parts of the Soviet Union, such as Georgia and the Ukraine. But that's not enough. And we're in the process, it appears, of losing some of our Middle Eastern puppet states. I mean, I don't think the CIA is behind all of these revolts in all of these countries.
No, they're trying to steer them. But let me throw this point in at you because I think it backs up your point about it being hubris. And they think they're in control, but they're really not in control, and I think that's evidenced by Fukushima. They've now had complete meltdown at Reactor 2. It's melted down through the floor. It could blow up like Chernobyl anytime. Many physicists, nuclear physicists we've had on have said this is already far worse than Chernobyl, and our government says it's no problem. The Japanese government, it turns out, has been covering things up. Why did they build it on a fault line? Why did they store the spent rods on top of the reactors? I mean, that's another example of just these people just always doing it in the most flimsy way they can, and it just shows an overall breakdown of common sense and no long-term view by the global ruling elite. I mean, they're just a bunch of nutcases.
Well, I agree with that. Yeah, I think that's, and a bunch of liars. Everything they say is a lie. And I certainly agree with that. We have nutcases ruling, and they lie. And
what do you...
Look, you know what you ought to do? You ought to find somebody to tell you what are the temperatures inside those nuclear reactors. Because the point that struck me, I don't know anything about it, But you would think a nuclear fire is a higher temperature than a kerosene fire. And these nuclear reactors have been melting down now for over a week. And why isn't all the steel containment, which is not very thick, nothing like the steel beams in the World Trade Center towers, why is it melted?
Yes, sir.
How does the kerosene fire cause massive steel structures to collapse in an hour? You know, limited, low-temperature fires, not even throughout the building. And yet we can have these meltdowns. I don't know what temperatures are involved in meltdowns.
We know 754 degrees to about 1,200. And some reports now that the total meltdown happened in 2, as high as 3,000 degrees.
Centigrade or Fahrenheit?
Fahrenheit.
Well, if you've got 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit or 3,000, you're so far beyond anything any kerosene fire can produce. And yet the steel containment around these reactors is not melted yet. Or if it has, it's just...
Well, no, actually, after 2 weeks at number 2, it finally did melt through...
2 weeks?
2 weeks.
All right. Well, compare those 2 weeks, those high temperatures...
But wait, actually, sir, to be technical, it did melt. 2, when it blew up, blew a hole in it, and it ran out. I'm sorry, I have the Associated Press right here.
Okay. Well, anyhow, somebody really ought to look at that, because...
No, you're right. It never melted even with thousands of degrees. I mean, to be technical, a hole was blown from the outside in one of the explosions, and it was breached, and then it melted inside and ran out. But no, it did not go through the steel.
Well, somebody needs, I don't know, but somebody that does know should face the question why nuclear fires didn't melt steel, but kerosene fires did. And why nuclear fires didn't melt it after all of these days and days. But it only took an hour in one of the World Trade Center buildings and an hour and a half in the other for a limited, smothered kerosene fire to...
Well, Doctor, we have the firefighters on video and the video of it saying it was molten lava just pouring and bubbling. I mean, how does kerosene do that?
Right, it can't. But you see, we might be able to make people, if the temperatures in those nuclear reactors are really as high as you said, we know what the maximum temperatures are in the kerosene fire, and we can just simply say, isn't this amazing that much thinner steel held up for weeks under much higher temperatures in one place, and it just completely collapsed in the other. Now, I guess NIST will come back and say, oh, well, Japanese make better steel than Americans. Maybe that's the answer.
Actually, some of that steel was Japanese.
Steel. The Japanese have fireproof steel.
Well, yeah, you can now burn a building down. They're talking about changing big building codes now, saying that a lighter can burn one down, and the engineers are fighting them on it, so they're having some trouble. In closing, Dr. Roberts, looking at this hypocrisy, what do you think of the fact that the Congress wasn't even consulted, no resolution, no authorization of force, and that only Ron Paul, Dennis Kucinich, and a few others, it's like 6 members have complained. All the rest say, we want to be vestigial, we want to be ceremonial. When the UN gives an order to Lord Obama, he follows it. I mean, this means the end of any checks and balances.
Well, Obama took Bush one step further. He didn't even ask for congressional authorization. He just acted on his own. So I call this the final step into Caesarism. We now have a Caesar. He can do what he wants. It doesn't. The law is meaningless. It has no effect. He's not subject to law, unless maybe he has an affair with an intern. But that's the situation we're in. U.S. government, the executive branch, only the executive branch. Of course, Congress can be penalized in the judiciary, but the executive branch is now above the law. It doesn't have to follow the law. Look how it's treating Bradley Manning. That's illegal. It's not even a protest. You'd think the ACLU would have all kinds of court cases about the torture of Bradley Manning. But, so what is it? I don't see how it's any different than the Gestapo or Stalin.
Well, that's my next issue. I think we need to take things back at the state level, continue to expose this tyranny as our last ditch to try to stop this ahead of the 1776 option. But talking to you, I kind of get sometimes that you think the only option could be 1776.
I don't really know if we have an option, because the people are so ignorant, they're so brainwashed because of patriotism, and they have no preparation, and it's going to come on them suddenly.
I tell you what, Doc, we're going into overdrive. Do 5 more minutes with us if you can, and we're going to take some calls. I have promised to go to George, Perry, Robert, Jasper, and others, so we're live into overdrive, deeper into the hour. We're going to let Dr. Roberts go here in about 5 minutes. Former head of policy, Reagan administration at the Treasury, written many books. His latest book, How the Economy Was Lost, The War of the Worlds, tells why America is disintegrating. And it's available just better bookstores everywhere, Amazon.com as well. He also writes public columns and just gives them out to everybody. Great guy. Used to write syndicated columns but didn't like being censored, so he just fights for absolutely free, the true mark of a true patriot. And we really appreciate he's fighting for freedom, which is the greatest prize, the great jewel. In closing, we were talking during that 1-minute break, Dr. Roberts, and I was saying I wish there was a free country to move to. You were saying, yeah, there really is nowhere with these globalists. They're trying to destroy Switzerland. You pointed out that's one of the better places still, but they're trying to get rid of its laws and its sovereignty. And then you said, but I don't think that they can get China. Elaborate on that.
Well, it has a government that has long-term thought capability, and that is in control of the situation, has plans to make China the world power, and that realizes the United States is in pain, and will be doing whatever it can to insulate itself from the fallout of the American collapse. So I don't think China has any interest in globalism. China has always been Chinese.
Isolationist.
That's right. They're Chinese, and they're not globalists. And so I don't think any kind of scheme can get them, but I could be wrong.
Well, listen, Mao had to kill 60-something million of them to get them in line. They are the original capitalist. And what you're saying is that communism is about a centimeter thick. Under it is basically isolationist business people, and China, and that won't play too well. Look how China spends all their money getting 94% of rare earth mineral mines in the world. Look at how they're building highways, speed rail, everything. We have got a dilapidated 70-year-old rail beds in this country.
Yeah, you can hardly go anywhere on a train here. Yes, I think China is outside of their plan, and I think Russia is too. I don't think they can get Russia. They're trying, but I don't think they can. And they almost did, but Putin put an end to that. And I just don't believe that they have the kind of power to do what this globalism thing is all about. I just don't think they have power.
But they sure run our country, and they're sure going to rob us on the way to destruction and attack every country they can.
Well, they seem to be doing that. Look, we were talking about what the American people can do, and the trouble with the people is, I was saying, they're brainwashed because of their patriotism, they're ignorant, they're unaware, and so they haven't any reserves. I mean, people don't have food stocks, they don't have any plans, they don't have any unity. People don't like each other, neighbors can't get along. People are they're more concerned to run down the people they need to be united with.
Well, you're right. On average, America is lazy and rotten. That doesn't mean we don't have good people here, but I got to tell you, Americans have become lazy and rotten.
Yeah, and they have no awareness. There's no unity. And they're so split and divided, and they're at each other's throats. I'm not just talking about rich and poor. I'm talking about among the poor, among the middle class. It's not I don't think the United States is, for a very long time, has ever had any real unity. It's every person for himself, It's even broken up families. It's like that, even within families.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't give possibility of a 17th century.
Well, it's a cycle of decadence, though. Every society goes through this, and in the end, it is what it is. We've got to spread the word and do what we can. There is an awakening happening, but you're right. A lot of folks are very decadent. Dr. Roberts, thank you for spending time with us. We look forward to speaking to you again very soon.
Okay, Alex. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Have a great week coming up. We're going to